Slang. I'm music journalist Thomas Mooney, and this is episode 227. This week, I'm joined by esteemed journalist and writer Josh Crutchmer. This is one of the first few episodes I recorded out in Okemah at Woodyfest this year. Huge thanks to everyone at Woodyfest for being so accommodating. They made it so easy for me to record a couple of episodes up there. They put me in a central location, and it was super quiet, so everything went super easy. If you haven't been to Woodyfest, I highly recommend going out. This past year, the lineup was stacked, and from what I kind of gather, it's been like that for the last few years and really going to be like that going forward. This year, incredible performances by Hayes Carl and Evan Felker, John Moreland, Pony Bradshaw, Red Dirt Rangers, Jamie Harris, Butch Hancock, Adeem the Artist, Aaron Lee Tashjian, BJ Barra, Margot Silker, and a whole lot more. It was such a laid-back experience. I just felt super comfortable the entire time. You really don't feel rushed or have this sense of FOMO, if you will, because more times than not, artists are playing multiple times during the last end of that week, so you don't ever feel like I'm missing insert name here because I'm watching insert name here. So now, I'm sure they'd also love to sell more tickets, but I think one of the nice aspects of this festival is that it doesn't ever feel overcrowded. Since it's not a couple of stages just built in a field somewhere, and it's a handful of these venues located in downtown Okemah, you really have a whole lot of elbow room because, again, multiple people playing at multiple times, and there being multiple venue settings. These next few episodes, they will all be from Okemah, so I'm sure that I'll expand a little bit more on the whole experience. This one right here with Josh, though, super enjoyable. We've been buddies on social media for the last few years, but this was a nice time to finally sit down and talk about music. He just released his latest book, Never Say Never, which is about the Cross Canadian Ragweed reunion shows and how all of that got set up. And for a lot of people, Ragweed is the touchstone band for their lives and for how they relate to not just Red Dirt music, but how they relate to Americana, country, and just music in general. We probably could have sat there all day and just talked about music, but we went and saw some music as well. So during this one, we talk about Turnpike and Ragweed and Wyatt Flores and just really the landscape of music in not just Red Dirt or Texas country, but Americana, country, rock and roll as a whole. Out here, style tells a story. It's not just the t-shirt. It is an anthem. It's a statement. That is why New Slang has proudly partnered with OG Lone Star, Austin-born, Texas-bred, and officially licensed by Lone Star Beer. They are bringing back the classics. Vintage-inspired t-shirts, those classic steel tavern signs, retro trucker caps, satin jackets, giant throw blankets. Whatever you can think of, OG Lone Star probably has it in stock somewhere. Whether you're walking into a place like Live here in Lubbock, the Continental Club over in Austin, or Cheatham Street Warehouse down in San Marcos, you'll stick out in the best of ways if you're wearing Lone Star gear from OG Lone Star. Whether you're a wallflower like myself, a two-stepper out on the dance floor, or holding court by the bar top, you'll feel right at home in vintage-inspired gear by OG Lone Star. Visit oglonestar.com and give them a follow on Instagram over at OG_lone_star while you're at it to see exactly what I'm talking about. All those links, they will be in the show notes. Again, that is oglonestar.com. All right, let's go ahead and get on into this episode. Here is Josh Crutchmer.
That they've returned because of the literally hundreds of other artists I've written about that are citing them as influences and the reason they picked up this guitar or the reason they went to this open mic. And that's another reason to listen to that music that we get, because it's also a window into the mark that the Turnpike Troubadours and Flatland Cavalries of the world are actively making right now.
So to go back on the Turnpike for a minute, obviously they released a record just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
What was the most surprising thing on that record for you?
The song "Be Here." I've never heard a love song to Rehab before. And when I wrote about it for Rolling Stone, but the gist of that song is that it's also Shooter Jennings' favorite song. He produced it. And the phrase "love letter to rehab" was his words. And musically, that struck me. And then talking to Evan and hearing him say what we thought to be true about it being about rehab, and then going, but also I just really wanted to write a sea shanty, and that being how it truly happened. Musically, that's what struck me. What actually felt different, though, was the way they went about it. And of course, they had Boys from Oklahoma to surprise drop it, but the Turnpike Troubadours don't surprise drop music. They don't at all. They're very meticulous. They are 2, 3, 4, 5 years between records. If you look at their catalog that goes back to 2010 officially, and compare it to Charlie Crockett's, Charlie's probably put out more records in the last 3 years than they have in their entire career. And so they are not a band that will drop music by surprise. And so what's actually more telling to me is that they made this music because they wanted to make an album. They just woke up and said, let's do it. And then in talking to Evan about that record for Rolling Stone, he goes, yeah, you know what? I don't want to do a press tour. I don't want to watch how this charts. I just want to write and release music. And that is something that Charlie Crockett's been making an entire career out of very well. He just wants to write and release music. And watching Evan suddenly decide he's at that place and the band leaning into that, it makes it a very exciting time to be even someone that mildly enjoys Turnpike, because you really do feel like they are in some sort of prime that we didn't even realize was possible for them. And I'm very excited to see what's next too.
You know what? I think that for starters on Be Here, like the sea shanty thing, you know, I thought there was some funny, I guess, irony juxtaposition of it being kind of like this sea shanty Irish drinking song, right?
Yes.
And it being like, well, yeah, that's right on the nose and intentional and everything like that. But as far as like the release of it, obviously there was all this pressure when they came back, the follow-up record. And I think because in this strange way of like COVID happening and there being this extra time to from the hiatus and all that kind of stuff, that built up so much pressure, and them just releasing a record just pop that balloon, you know. And you know, I jokingly said, you know, well, you know, they put out that billboard, they released it and you know, we're gonna release it here right now, and that was like a way to, you know, keep Zach Bryan from moving a release date.
And I think the same is true about the music itself. Turnpike fans the hardcore ones tend to go a little swifty on folks, and when Heaven Passing Through dropped, there's all sorts of speculation about who that was, what that meant, who it was for. Was it about the songwriter that fessed up to, in her words, being Lori a year ago? That was a prevailing sentiment. And so to go out to the Crystal Theater last night and hear Evan Felker go, no, that song about seeing the stars and the constellations was about me and my daughter seeing the stars and the constellations. And I just thought that was really, 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 really funny and telling of the type of artist he is versus where the people that experience it would like to put it. And I think the album releases the exact same way. I think they just figured that out and realize now this is the path forward. And that goes for writing and creating original songs, but also dropping records. And if they're going to work with Shooter, he's going to turn them out as fast as they would like. And they turned this one out in 2 weeks.
The fandom, the Easter egg drops of the connecting all the dots, and I'm great. I'm good with all that kind of stuff. Right. I love seeing all that stuff, and I love seeing all the connections and everything. But sometimes, just the reason why this is reoccurring is simply because, they're from this certain area, and like, just a reoccurring theme,
Right.
With Heaven Passing Through, I feel like, talking with a couple of people, the best analogy that I could throw them as far as seeing that dot of like, well, this is clearly like him as a kid, him as like a young adult, and him as a now is. It's the same mold as like Don't Take the Girl by Tim McGraw.
It is.
It's like those, and I guess like in a way like Evan's probably not really written a song in that way of like 3 moments, but like I do love like the fervor of Turnpike fans, and yet sometimes I'm like, oh guys, let's just pump the brakes on this. It's probably not as deep as that.
It's just funny because it's them. Like there are so many artists, and we watch them that would love nothing more than to drop Easter egg after Easter egg and make an entire life out of that. And then here comes Turnpike, swaggering down the street, and an Easter egg accidentally falls out of their back pocket and they don't even realize it. And it's the best of both worlds because it allows them to maintain this, aura of mystery is too strong of a word, but they like being enigmatic. They like being a band that people feel like they don't quite understand. But it's just happening within the personalities of the 6 members, and people are out there thinking that it's Taylor Swift trying to connect every single lyric she's ever written into one single thread somehow. And that's just not Turnpike. You're right. It's a product of the lives they've lived, and this is just the lives they've lived.
Yeah. There's clearly like a through line,
right?
But like we don't have to. Like I guess like my whole thing is like you don't have to hold those songs to 6 characters, or 5, or whatever, how many characters we want to agree or disagree on. But I think that like honestly, one of my favorite, one of the first things that appealed to me with Turnpike was this, what I kind of would characterize as like that mythical kind of. There's this epicness. In this way of like American folklore to their writing, but it's in such a common man way that like they play both cards, even though they're at the opposite ends of the deck, if you will.
And I mean, we did that. And I don't mean we as journalists, I mean we as the collective community and demographic that makes up their fan base. We allowed so much of their songs so fast to just almost feel like they always happen surrounded by a fog machine, which that conjures up 2 things. Like it conjures up, I say that, and you can hear Long Hot Summer Day play on whatever bar you're playing in the night on the touch tunes, and the touch tunes might as well have fog machine coming out of it. But it also works with Heaven Passing Through. Like all of a sudden, like that notion you have of the Turnpike Troubadours and Evan Felker's writing especially, but not limited to it, is also a product of the folklore that we've projected on them. And I think everything just works in concert now. And everybody, I mean, I think the fans do their part. For better or worse, they drive me insane. But the fans that connect all these dots are as important to the Turnpike Troubadours as their music is, because they're the ones that they're the reasons that arenas get filled up and amphitheaters get filled up and records get bought, and they're the people these songs are intended to move, and it's all working in concert. And Turnpike has figured that out as well as any band in the world.
Yeah, I think like there's obviously they've talked a little bit about like, oh, well, that'd be cool to have like a little bit of a canon kind of thing.
Yeah.
I always kind of think of their songs in that similar way of like the William Faulkner of
Yeah.
where like all those stories are in this made up fictional county based
Yes.
off of wherever Oxford is, you know?
Right.
And that's done so much for them.
Uh-huh.
Like, because I don't like, there's other people that we don't put in that same, with the same parameters.
Yes.
But like, it's, you know, it's the world building, I guess.
Correct.
That looks exactly like your world, you know, but somehow cooler.
And it's easier to visualize because if you go to a Tyler Childers concert, his production leans into this. It's easier to visualize an artist like Tyler Childers having all of his songs come from the middle of like a mushroom trip, but then he goes and puts all these videos for 2 hours during his set as backdrops that puts you inside of the mushroom trip or whatever alteration of the of his mind these songs come from. That's just an easier way to visualize the same thing. We just do it with Turnpike, with Fog Machines and Mystique, and there's probably always a little hint of Moonlight in the background. And obviously neither of those are true. That's just where our minds go when we hear them. And those are two artists that also realize that's what their fans and the people that consume their music think.
Yeah. So the last book that you wrote is focused on Ragweed and the reunion. For starters, like, I guess there's really only been like 2 other shows announced, the Waco.
Yeah.
And then they just replaced, I'm blanking on who they replaced.
Oh, they replaced Tim McGraw. Tim McGraw had the back surgery.
Yeah. Is there anything else kind of in the works? Do you think that there's anything as far as like more shows, or are they going to try and keep that, for lack of a better word, sacred in a one place once a year, one every something?
The only thing that I don't think they'll do, I don't think they're going to go on what you would consider a tour, but I think they are going to play all around the country again. And I think, and the reason that I say I think this is because Cody Canada has told me this. They enjoy the back and forth they're having with their fans on socials. They enjoy the teasers. And even the Colorado Springs replacement gig was spent. There was a week run up to that was just nothing but social media videos that were like, here's a FaceTime call with Cody and Randy Ragsdale, and they're talking about how much they love Colorado. And yeah, it's obvious and dorky, but they're all there. That's who they are too, and they love that. And so I think you're going to continue to get new shows, and they're going to be shows that are as big as they can make them. Can they sustain a stadium tour? I don't know. A year ago, the question was, could they fill a stadium? And most people, including the bands themselves, thought the answer was no, and they thought 32 to 35,000 at Boys from Oklahoma would be a success. And so we all doubted them. So I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that I don't think they could fill up the Rose Bowl or Madison Square Garden or whatever. I think they're going to go play where they want to play. And when they do, they're going to have fun building up the hype. And the reason that works, though, is because they know their show is they know the payoff will be in the show. To this day, there is no band that I've seen that puts on a more rock and roll show than them. Certainly not in this genre. And you don't leave a Ragweed show and not had fun. You usually leave it really happy. That was another trademark of Boys from Oklahoma. They were happy. So they've got it figured out, and that's what they want to do. And my prediction in 2026 is a lot more than just going back to Stillwater in April and doing those shows again, which I think they'll do. I think you're going to see them circle places that they want to get back to, and then they'll get back to. and I don't think you'll see them play lots of festivals. Maybe not any. Festivals are wonderful, and Woody Guthrie Festival is an out of body experience. But for the artists and bands themselves, I don't think they want to go stand. I don't think they want to stand in a makeshift stage in a field with the sun in their eyes. I think they would like a stadium arena or an amphitheater that makes them comfortable, that makes the music feel intimate enough, and that's where I think you will see them go. And I think I'd be surprised if there were less than 10 of those next year. I think there might be more. And since it's timely and since it's the world, it's happening, they're going to be a part of the Robert Earl Keen flood relief concert at Whitewater at the end of August. That I think was just announced last night. I don't know when this will go up, but that's the sense of timing. We're still in the wake of all that. And Ragweed's going to play that, and they're going to do it because they want to. I mean, obviously Robert Earl asked them, but they're playing because they want to. So Ragweed wants to play with each other is a really, really, really good and different feeling than any we've gotten to have for a while, and I don't think that's going away.
Yeah. Okay. This is a side note. We don't have to go on it, but I think we're peak music festival, like oversaturated, like out the ass, like on just there being too many music festivals. But that's all good news. That's all great.
Yeah, it's great. It's good because it's good that they were able to flood the market with music festivals.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't ever think that was possible, but here we are.
Yeah. It's just, oh my God, there's another one in a field somewhere,
Yes.
But with a cool name too. Like,
right.
That's the one thing I will say, like, that I thought like we would run out of good festival names, and like they just keep on.
They never do.
Well, shit. Okay. It's just not blah, blah, blah fest. But it's on Ragweed again too. It's Ragweed. It's not CCR.
I do call them Ragweed. And that was just because like I grew up a CCR fan, and I can't make that switch in my head. However, I know people out there call them CCR. I get that, and I wish you all the best. Well, we're going to call them Ragweed for the rest of this column.
On that right there, right there. One of my buddies used to always say, and maybe this is something that Cody can start integrating into everything, but he always thought Cody should do quote unquote State of the Union addresses just based off of the song, If I Were President, right?
Yeah.
So they need to start leaning more into that right there, the State of the Union and just do it like once a month or so.
Actually, that's a really good idea.
Yeah. Because I do think it's so funny because you mentioned the awkwardness of doing social media, and for them now, and I'm like, yeah, those guys are like, those dudes are past this TikTok age, and yet they're still like there's still that pause at the beginning and everything. But I think it's so funny and good that they're embracing that, and that obviously because they know they're having fun now.
Yes.
Yeah.
They know very well what their age are and where that relates to social media, and they don't care. And I like to think of all of us in our collective age group as still young and spry, but Todd Snyder had this analogy that he made about seeing John Prine later in his career, and he put it on this tribute song to John, and it was at the end of John Says he would dance off the stage later in his life. He literally would, and like he'd shake his ass at the crowd. And Todd goes, I think that I watched that and I thought, when you're young, you're dancing because you're sexy. When you're old, you're dancing because you don't give a fuck if you're sexy or not. And I think that also applies to how Ragweed handles social media. They're gonna go be themselves, knowing that it is going to look out of place because they don't give a fuck if they look out of place or not.
Made for the dance hall, the dive bar, the fire pit, the front porch, OG Lone Star is your go-to spot to grab vintage-inspired attire and gear. Nothing pairs with a cold, crisp Lone Star quite like a comfortable Lone Star t-shirt, a sharp trucker cap, a smooth satin jacket, a bold belt buckle, and a host of other goods by the OG Lone Star. Officially licensed OG Lone Star is the real deal. Visit oglonestar.com. Hitting the rural forgotten pockets of the map, photographer Kat Swansea celebrates the sun-faded storefronts and abandoned roadsides. All but buried by the desert, Kat documents the places we've left behind. Her debut book, Texas Textures, and its follow-up, Texas Textures Volume 2, which she just released earlier this year, are journeys through old ghost towns, rusted-out gas stations, and desert facades. Part memoir and part classic coffee table book, both Texas Textures volumes are the exploration of the dissolving past. They play on the differences between ruins and relics. If you love grain and grit, hard-scrabble beauty, and intimate Texas storytelling, be sure to head on over to catswansea.com and pick up Texas Textures Volume 1 and Volume 2. Those links, they will be in the show notes. All right, let's get on back into the episode. Todd has been like one of those guys who, in the few times I've interviewed him, made me feel like, oh man, this is the 70s or the 60s. And it's simply because of this one specific deal. Most interviews, like 99% of interviews I've done, cell phone.
Yeah.
Only person I've ever talked to where I had to call like the hotel.
Right.
The hotel room. And I'm like, man, that just sets you in a certain era right there.
I have to call and get transferred someplace by a person picking up the phone and acting as an operator.
So the book, obviously the book came fairly quickly, post Boys from Oklahoma. What's the writing process like when it's something like that feels a little bit more, not time specific or that you have a super harsh deadline, but like, you know, you worked it where it came fairly quick.
Okay, so I'm actually glad you brought this up because I actually do want people to. No, I want you to buy Never Say Never. I want you and Red Dirt Unplugged. I want you to buy them, and if you have them, I want you to spread the word about them. But the reason I say I want that is because of the process you just articulated. For me, when I decide to write a book now. And this is true since the 2020 Red Dirt book, because that one, it's really true. In the first book, you write your whole life, and then all of a sudden, like the next takes you a year. The time I allot myself to write a book, start to finish, idea to publication is 18 months. And that is faster than most, but it's still 18 months. But at the same time, parallel to my involvement in music, I have risen the journalism ladder. I'm a planning editor at the New York Times. And for whatever that means to people, what it means to me is I'm trained as a New York Times editor. I mean, I know how to edit and how to write. And I've lived my life on deadlines, so I know how to write fast. And I honestly can only really operate when I'm writing fast. So I start out a book project and I have a timeline, and there's deadlines for writing and for editing and for publication. And then within that, I built in also, this is the media window. And then of course I wait till the night before all those deadlines. And then I've crammed them all out because I can't turn that part of me off as a journalist. But that was the process, that resulted in the Red Dirt Unplugged book last December. And that was the one that had Wyatt Flores, Dylan Gossett, the Great Divides come back, Josh Malloy, Caitlin Butts. They were all in there. And all my books are a product of direct interviews with artists. I'm very rarely doing memoir stuff or anything like that. So it was a lot of work, and I had it all planned out, and it was going to come out just before Christmas because people don't really release books in that time. And I thought Black Friday would be a good time to market it. And also Wyatt was playing the Ryman for the first time as a headliner with the Great Divide opening, and Lance Rourke, who's in the book, and also who co-wrote the Ruby Ann song with Turnpike, and he has a character, Ruby Ann, on one of his songs in his upcoming album too. So that'll be a random new Easter egg. Anyway, they were playing the Ryman in December, and I was like, that's where this book has to come out. It just does. So that was why I was on the schedule I was with Red Dirt Unplugged. And wouldn't you know it, 5 months before that, deadline and release, I find out about Ragweed reuniting, and I can't set that out. I can't. I can do lots of things. I can make lots of choices. I can. I could even abide by the criticism of me and my work that it is out there in some circles of Texas music journalism. I could abide by that if I wanted, and um, not not press my work as hard as I am, not write as many books, lay off Rolling Stone. I'm not going to. But the one thing that I could not do was set out the Cross Canadian Ragweed reunion. I could not do that. So then I was faced with a choice. I don't have 18 months. I've got 8. And I'm either going to I could have just covered it, put up a Rolling Stone story, enjoyed the shows. I could have done a full book and put it out like this December, 8 months after the Boys from Oklahoma shows. And I just thought all those things that I said about me and my journalism training and deadlines, I just thought that this should be given the weight. It sold out 4 nights at my alma mater's stadium. And I thought this should be treated like I would if I were a sports editor and the team that plays in the stadium won a championship, which meant I had to have a book done then. So I just jumped in Ragweed's hip pocket for 6 months. Really, even before their shows were announced, I was laying the groundwork for this book. I was interviewing the band. I was watching them become friends with each other again. I was at Oklahoma State's homecoming when they saw each other for the first time, and Cody and Grady hugged for the first time in 17 years. And I was just making sure that I was there, and it's just close enough that I could remember it. And I'm going into my notes app and typing up what I'm seeing on my phone. I was, there again when at Mile Zero when they played their first, actual set. I actually got to play a big part in them getting inducted into the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame in March at Cain's. And all this was just because I was there. And being there and watching this play out made the writing real easy because I was just writing what I saw. I go to something, I go to Mile Zero and I just go back and write down what I saw. And by the middle of March, I had a 200-page book. And it wasn't just Ragweed because the people that made Boys from Oklahoma what it was all were on board too. It includes, I went to the folks at Oklahoma State that brokered the concert, and they just volunteered that Ragweed was their backup plan because a Jason Aldean, Miranda Lambert concert fell through because no one got back to them. And by happenstance, the right-hand man of the person brokering it happened to be Kyle Waters, who was the bartender at the Wormy Dog when Cody played there on Tuesday nights. And he says, in response to getting nowhere with a Jason Aldean, Miranda Lambert concert, he goes, "Hey, we got to at least ask Ragweed." And that is what set it all in motion. And I got to that detail in this book. And I got to talk to the promoters, which sound and booking agent John Folk, and all that sounds boring until you read it and you realize just how unlikely all this was. They were realizing in real time they had lightning in a bottle. So those details were fun. And talking to the other artists on the bill, including Turnpike, and honestly, especially Turnpike, because of Evan's perspective on what a comeback feels like and what he was hoping Ragweed would get to experience. And I was just seeing all that play out, and I was getting all those interviews done, and then I would just kind of sit down and jot them down. And this was honestly a book that, for better or worse, wrote itself. And then I'd already planned for the last 4 chapters, 20 pages a chapter, to be from the 4 Boys from Oklahoma shows. So that was just 4 days of no sleep because I was writing them after the shows. Sometimes not in a completely straight-laced state of mind because I wasn't turning down the shots either at the shows, and I was celebrating. And I was down in the pit dancing and screaming. But at the end of the day, I was going back to my hotel room and staying up till that was written. And so I wanted it to feel like that. I wanted Never Say Never to feel unpolished and in the moment, because that's what a Ragweed show is. It's unpolished and it's of the moment. And I thought that's what they deserved. But I also thought that my entire life, which I never thought I would actually get to see, but once I realized that Ragweed was reuniting, I realized that my entire career as a journalist had built to covering that. And the only way to do that was to put Never Say Never out immediately. On the downside, I didn't get to do any promotion. I didn't get to have, a conversation like this with really anybody. I didn't get to go on a book tour. I didn't get to do events. Like when I put Red Dirt Unplugged out, me and Wyatt did 3 events where we were signing books and stuff. And that was so fun. The only way to promote it was to put it up on the video boards during the concerts. Thank God that worked. But because I did something that is not really advisable, there was no blueprint for how to spread the word beyond that. And so I just declared myself that the rest of this year, Never Say Never is on its release cycle. And I'm going around telling anybody that will listen about it because it's a great story. It is a timeless book. It's timeless in such a way that I want everyone to remember what April was like. And then I am going to tack on a bonus chapter and do a special edition after Waco because I want people that want to go to Waco to have the same chance. And I'm not going to raise the price on it or anything. I'm not going to change that. But I'm going to give folks the opportunity to add that on. And if somebody already has the book, I'll sell just the Waco chapter separately. It's not quite done yet because I think after Waco, Ragweed's year will be done. And that's when I'll be actually done with making this into what I wanted it to be. But it's close enough to it now that I'm just delighted with it. And I don't want to go through it again next year. My next book I want to take 18 months and be deliberate with and have a long pre-sale window and all the fun. But this was the capstone experience of my life as a journalist. And honestly, it's my life just in Red Dirt in general.
One of the things that people always, I guess, I don't know, there's something about how do you gain the trust of these artists? I guess like in my head, I always envisioned once you kind of go down this road, it's the classic Almost Famous kind of you're riding the road with a band and all that kind of stuff. And luckily for me, I was able to get super integrated with a lot of these bands. You've done so as well. I realized though at some point though, like, not all these journalists have that same kind of access. One, how do you gain that trust and how do you maintain that relationship and just keep it actually like as where you're in these rooms?
The first thing that you have to accept, and I think you do this too. I think you have to accept that what you're doing is something adjacent to the classic notion of journalism. I actually usually will put this in an intro to every book that I write that you need to know that a lot of these folks I'm friends with, which makes this some level of a conflict of interest. But I don't know. I was in Stillwater when the Yellow House existed. On occasion, I was the weed plug for the Yellow House. Shockingly enough, the Yellow House could run out of weed, and they knew that I lived 2 blocks away. But stuff like that, I stayed up all night with Stoney LaRue and Dub Miller, and I watched Randy Crouch or Bob Childers barge into the door when we were all ready to go to bed at 4 a.m. And then all of a sudden we're seeing the sunrise because Bob's on the kitchen floor playing Outlaw Band or something. So I've got that history and always felt like I had some obligation to come back and there would be a chance for me to tell the story of the music. And I was always a really, really, really self-conscious about the conflict of interest part, they being the Almost Famous. If I ever write a memoir, and maybe I will, I'm going to call it Almost Famous for that exact reason. But the fact you're with the band, but also covering the band, if you're not upfront about that, then you're doing fluff pieces. Your credibility takes a hit. And so I laid out some parameters when I realized that was the world for me. And those parameters are really simple. Wherever our stories go, wherever our interviews go, we're going to tell the truth. I will not be I will not be a piece of PR. I will not help you make something look one way or the other. Wherever our stories go, it's got to be true. I'm not going to print a lie. I'm not going to have that attached to my name. And secondly, in exchange for my good faith in that, if I'm with you and I see something bad, if I see, you commit a felony, you can't hide from that either. And that's really the only parameters I have. It has to be true, and you can't hide if something bad happens. And now it's one thing to feel that way before I had the rapport that I do on a larger scale. But it all blew up and really, really took off for me in the original Red Dirt book when I wanted to get it in Evan Felker's hands when he went off the grid, and then he popped up and told me, "Hey, I'm sober and I want to play music again." And that single interview was just me on the other end of the phone letting Evan talk. I wasn't pressuring him to say things. I wasn't asking things he wasn't comfortable about. I was letting him get things off his chest. And then I did right by it. And everything that I have gotten since is a result of being fair to the Turnpike Troubadours. It's the reason I got to sit last night with Hayes Carl and talk about his record. Everything that's happened for me was because I was fair to Turnpike at a time when not every journalist was being fair to them, as you know, because you were calling the world's attention to that at a time that I wasn't. So there's some advice that you can't glean from that if you're young, but the parts about being fair and honest are. And for young journalists, people starting out that want to do that, if you have those relationships, then you need to work your way through them. You need to be honest with whatever artists that you're close enough with that you want to tell their story, and just make sure the story they're telling is an accurate portrayal. And if you do that enough, it just all of a sudden starts building. I could only write what I want to write about, never take one single pitch or listen to one new record that someone sends us. And I could live to be 100 and write till I die, and I would get maybe a third of the way through what I want to write about now because of all that, because of the avenues that just a little bit of a commitment to honesty and fairness got me in the 2020, 2021 timeframe when Turnpike was working through what became their comeback. And that I think is a very real and applicable takeaway. It's just that not everybody's going to be Turnpike. You're going to have to be fair and honest sometimes with just your local bar band or the person that's dominating your college campus. But if you want to cover it from an angle that you have some insight and insider perspective, lay it all out there. I just lean into the fact that most of the shows I see, especially where Red Dirt comes in, are from some insider's perspective. But I don't want to hide that. I want to let people know. That's why so many of the stories that I write involve like the artist's perspective when they're taking the stage. Like, I know that I'm here. I know I'm lucky to be here, and I might as well share that with the world because not everyone gets to do that. Is that access journalism? I guess, but it's also true, and it's also fair, and it's also a side of the world folks don't get to see. And I think there's value in that too. And again, when something goes awry, when something isn't great, if you've done your job right, that will work out the way it's supposed to as well. The reason Robert Earl and Clara Keene talked to me about their experiences with the Texas flooding and Camp Mystic and the relief plans they have and the ties that Kerrville has to music. this week. The reason I put that in Rolling Stone was because since Robert Earl retired, I have treated him fairly and treated him honestly. And what he shared with me, I have taken care of. When he shared that he was sober, I took great care to not make Robert Earl into some advocate for anti-alcohol or something. Just doing that enough gained their trust. And at a time when I needed them as a journalist, which was this week, because it's very important to show that disaster's inseparable ties to the Texas music community. And I thought Robert Earl was the person to do that. And the reason that worked was because of all the things that I've told you about myself as a journalist and my approach. It paid off when I needed to be a pure journalist, and Robert Earl was willing, and so was Clara. And that's why, that's how that story happened. So everything is always working in concert if you're thinking big picture like that.
Yeah. I do have like one other big J journalism question.
Let's do it.
Now I think that kind of the book thing is separate because it is very much like you're writing for a very specific audience. How do you balance that in your head of the writing for the casual fan and like the diehard fan, and making sure that I guess like that, getting that message across for both, but also like knowing that, because I've always had like a little bit of that struggle of like, who's the audience here?
If I was going to boil it down to a sentence, I would say I write about where the music you like comes from. Now, that word like is doing some heavy lifting because that encompasses casual fans and diehards. The key for me, and I think it's a key for anybody that writes, I think the key is in the writing. The very first thing that I tell myself when I go to write a book is that I need to pay attention to somebody that might only be interested in one chapter. So I try and make every single chapter of my books stand alone for somebody that might just pick up Red Dirt Unplugged because they're a fan of Josh Malloy. Or they might be Josh Malloy's family, and they might not ever read anything else. But then it's also my responsibility to structure the 26 chapters in that book in an order that when you finish it, you understand why Red Dirt has blown up. And in my day-to-day writing in journalism, if I'm writing for Rolling Stone or to a lesser degree, a place like No Depression, my starting point is that I want to do right by the diehards. And then as I'm actually crafting a story, I'm always asking myself, if somebody reads this and doesn't know a thing about the Turnpike Troubadours and they get to hear, what are they going to have learned? And so I'm very careful if I make a reference to not gloss over it and assume everybody knows. It's why my writing, I think, comes across as a fast read, because I'm not trying to bog anybody down. Because I'll get a lot of details in, because the details that I'm putting in are for the diehards, but I'm not spending page after page on them because I don't want to lose a casual fan or a newcomer. So I think your starting point has to be, you want the biggest fans of these artists. Your target demographic is the biggest fans of these artists. And the question you actually ask yourself as you're putting it together is, how am I going to reach the casual fan or someone that doesn't know anything about them? And if you read your own work as in a critical way from the perspective of, would I lose somebody that knows nothing about this band here? You really find yourself continuing to do right by the target demographics too, the hardcore fans. And ultimately, you probably usually end up making it better. Because even a hardcore fan can read something that you write about. We'll just keep saying Turnpike because they come. Even a hardcore Turnpike fan, if you do it right, can read something you've written about them and go point to their friend that's never heard of the band and say, this is what I'm talking about when I say I like Turnpike. It all works in concert, but I always try and start with the diehards and then account for everybody else for as long as I can on whatever I'm writing.
Yeah, I've always had such a problem for myself, like just continually going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And writing in this like way of, I'm losing someone here. And then I think like that's the beauty of having an editor who just goes, yeah, we don't need all this part right here. And when that first starts happening to you, the ego takes a couple of shots, but then as you get to a certain spot, you kind of go, oh, this was necessary. This is the reason why I'm not the one cutting this paragraph out.
Right. I just got a text from Brad Bellahar that I misspelled his name in Rolling Stone today. Speaking of not wanting to lose anybody 2/3 of the way through a story. First of all, one thing I like about your writing is how long you can go down that rabbit hole and not get lost. But what I really try to identify potential exit paths. And sometimes you find yourself riding down a rabbit hole and you realize you have to power through. So at that point, if you're comfortable enough in your writing, you're finding ways to hold the interest of the casual observer. Newcomers, sometimes they're going to bail because they're not interested, but the casual observer that does know a thing or two, if you can just keep them along, you're leading them down the cave with a little flashlight on, and they're at the end of the trail, but you're yelling back at them to keep up, and here's why, and telling them something else interesting. As long as you're keeping them in mind, you'll find that a lot of your writing takes care of itself. That's been my experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how, you get better as you
right?
continue doing it. Right. I think like a lot of people have love the idea of being a writer versus actually like the practical, like the practice of actually doing it. And those things are two different things in my head.
It's also strange because the practice of being a writer isn't pleasant. And that's not even like, the hours of the money. It's the worst part about being a writer is staring at a keyboard or a piece of paper and you can't put words into it. Like that, the same writer's block you get when you're in grade school and you have a homework assignment you don't want to do, you get when you have a book you really want to write and you can't find words. That's the worst. And there's no way, the only way out with that is through. And I have just learned to accept that. And it's also really funny because of all the things that I've written in books. I very rarely have clear, vivid memories of actually typing down the words that actually became any of my books. But I have many, many, many vivid memories of sitting in front of a blank screen, or all of a sudden I've been lively and spry all day, and now all of a sudden I want to take a nap when I should be writing. Like those feelings are just part of the game too. And I have just kind of learned to accept that, but that's a lot of people's line they don't want to cross, and I don't necessarily blame them. If you're going to write and you're going to do it for a long time, and I think this is true. I think this is actually the closest place that our corner of the world aligns with songwriters, is that they go through that too. There's sometimes the words just escape them, and then they know that the only way out is through, but that they don't want to force things, and that gets in your head too. And the only way to get to the other side of that is to realize it's part of the process too. Sometimes you don't have the words because the words weren't ready to be written down yet, and that's not fun, but it makes the end product a lot better.
I think it's one of those things where saying this out loud, people may give an eye roll, but when I've said it to other writers, they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I get it. I have that problem too. And it's the, sometimes you like something so much and you have like 25 things you want to say and you don't know how to start it out. Like you don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes there's something that, and it could just even be just specifically a song and you're wanting to point out a million things about it and you don't know how to start it. Sometimes like I've realized, man, when I've only kind of liked this one thing and there's only one thing to say about it, that's 100 times easier than the thing that you actually super love more.
It is very hard now for me to write about Ragweed, Turnpike, Wyatt, Caitlin. It is very easy for me to write about artists that I have a more arm's length relationship with. The best thing that I have written so far this year was Charlie Crockett, and those words just came so easy. And I spent the bus ride after his Houston rodeo show back to Austin in his bus interviewing him. And he's telling me things, and I'm like, I can't wait to get this interview over because I want to write down what you just said so bad. I never get that feeling with Wyatt, Cody, with Turnpike anymore. I always find myself overthinking those, and but I've also learned that I can apply some songwriting lessons to my own. I've heard enough stories of how this chorus or this verse that ended up being the third verse came to my head, and I couldn't get it out, and so I just started playing around it. I now will find myself writing paragraphs, blocks of a story, blocks of a book, knowing they're not going to be the intro or the lead. Just because I find that I want to type this paragraph so bad, so I'm going to do it, and then I'll figure out where it goes later. But that's directly a lesson I've learned from being around songwriters.
Yeah. One of those things that sometimes people will email me asking, so-and-so at university or wherever, and I'm wanting to write, give us some pointers or whatever. And I'm like, don't delete anything. When you're writing, just, I think it's something that I've heard Will Clark Green say when it comes to songwriting. And that's when somebody would say, well, that line's not that great. Let's do better. We'll beat it.
We'll do better when I beat it.
We're going to put this here until we beat the line. And I understand, like, sometimes that's like, I understand that is not what we're wanting to say, but sometimes you just have to actually just quote unquote write something bad to get to the point of writing something good.
And also, like, if we're being honest, there's only like 8 different ways to write about somebody. If you're going to like do a conventional profile of them, like, you can start talking about like the golden glow of a sunset splashing across the stage in, Houston, or you can say, it's 6:15 p.m. and Cody Johnson is late for his interview, and that's your first line. Or you could talk about like, somebody's kids, or Wyatt Flores says 1, 2, 3 canes, and he stepped out onto the canes ballroom floor. At the end of the day, there's only like 8 really ways to start a story anyway, which also has its own way of getting in your head. But realizing that I was limited on what I was going to say at the start of my stories actually made the rest of my stories a lot better, because I'm really not afraid to just start writing and then figuring out where stuff goes.
Yeah, I always thought like, maybe do I just become like that bit guy who just starts everything off with like that 6:15?
I would love to,
or like that time deal, and like
it's freeing. It's freeing. It looks ridiculous, but it's freeing.
Yeah,
it's liberating. It takes the pressure. It takes the most important pressure off whatever you're writing to just pick a bit you can commit to and do it.
Yeah. Speaking of bits, do you know who's saving country music?
No, I don't.
Well, on that note, I guess so.
Everybody covering this music is important to it. Don't forget it.
Josh, it's been great talking with you today. Let's go see some music.
Let's go see some music, and it's long overdue, and I've had a blast, Tom. Thank you.
All right, that is it for this episode. Huge thanks to Josh Crutchmer for sitting down for a minute to talk shop. Huge thanks to Woodyfest for having everything so smooth sailing while I was up in Okemah back in the summer. If you haven't yet, be sure to go visit our partners over at OG Lone Star. Check out Texas Textures Volume 1 and Volume 2 by photographer Kat Swansea. If you haven't checked out my Substack yet, it's called Tom Mooney's Almanac. It's about Texas historical markers, it's about Texas music, and a lot of other things related to Texas and storytelling, and yeah, a lot of things that you'll probably like. So do the obvious, go subscribe to it. And yeah, we'll see y'all next week for another episode.